You reach out and touch the wall next to you. You feel solid matter pressing against your skin. You sense resistance, texture, temperature. Every nerve in your hand confirms that you're making contact with something real and substantial. But you're not touching anything at all. What you're experiencing as touch is actually electromagnetic forces preventing atoms from occupying the same space. You never make physical contact with anything, ever. The sensation of touching is a complete illusion created by invisible fields of force. And if this is true, then everything you think you know about the physical world is fundamentally wrong. You assume that when you sit in a chair, your body is resting against solid matter. When you walk on the ground, you believe your feet are making contact with the earth. When you pick up an object, you think you're grasping something real and tangible. But none of this is actually happening. You're floating through empty space, suspended by forces you can't see, interacting with structures that barely exist. The reality of touch is far stranger and more disturbing than anything you've ever imagined. To understand why nothing you touch is real, you need to understand what atoms actually are. You've been taught that atoms are the basic building blocks of matter, tiny solid particles that combine to form everything you see and touch. This is completely wrong. Atoms are not solid objects. They're not even close to being solid. An atom consists of a nucleus surrounded by electrons, but the space between the nucleus and electrons is vast compared to the size of the particles themselves. If you scaled up an atom so that the nucleus was the size of a marble, the electrons would be orbiting miles away. The rest of the atom is empty space. Not just mostly empty space, completely empty space. This means that everything made of atoms, which is everything you can touch, is almost entirely nothing. The chair you're sitting on, the floor beneath your feet, your own body, are all more than 99.99% empty space. But it gets worse. Even the parts that seem to contain something, the nucleus and electrons, aren't solid objects either. They're energy patterns, probability clouds, mathematical descriptions of fields and forces. At the deepest level, there are no solid objects anywhere in the universe. There's just energy arranged in patterns that create the illusion of substance. So when you touch something, what exactly is happening? You're not making contact between two solid objects, because there are no solid objects. Instead, you're experiencing the interaction between electromagnetic fields. Every atom in your hand is surrounded by a cloud of negatively charged electrons. Every atom in the object you're touching is also surrounded by electrons. When you bring your hand close to the object, these electron clouds push against each other. Like charges repel, so the electrons in your hand and the electrons in the object create a force that prevents them from getting too close. This repulsive force is what you experience as the sensation of touching something solid. You never actually touch anything. There's always a tiny gap between the atoms in your hand and the atoms in the object. You're feeling the force that maintains this gap, not contact between solid materials. It's like trying to push two magnets together with the same poles facing each other. You feel resistance, but the magnets never actually touch. The force you feel is electromagnetic repulsion, not solid contact. This is happening constantly with every sensation of touch you experience. You've never touched your own face, never made contact with another person, never grasped a solid object. You've spent your entire life floating through empty space, suspended by invisible electromagnetic forces. But if atoms are mostly empty space and you never actually touch anything, why does the world seem so solid and substantial? Why doesn't everything just pass through everything else like ghosts walking through walls? The answer lies in the incredible strength of electromagnetic forces and the precise balance that keeps atomic structure stable. The electromagnetic force is one of the fundamental forces of nature, enormously powerful at the atomic scale. These forces are so strong that they can support enormous amounts of weight and resist tremendous pressure while maintaining the gaps between atoms. The electromagnetic repulsion that prevents you from pushing your hand through a wall is more than sufficient to support your body weight or resist any force you could possibly apply. The emptiness of atoms is real, but the forces that maintain atomic structure are incredibly robust. You can't push through walls not because they're solid, but because the electromagnetic forces holding their atomic structure together are far stronger than any force your body can produce. This creates a strange paradox. Matter is mostly empty space, but this empty space is organized by forces so powerful that it behaves exactly like solid matter for all practical purposes. But there's another layer to this illusion. Even the sensation of touch itself is a construction of your nervous system, not a direct experience of electromagnetic forces. Your brain interprets electrical signals from nerve endings and creates the subjective experience of contact, pressure, texture, and temperature. The actual electromagnetic interactions happening at the atomic level are converted into nerve impulses, processed by your brain, and transformed into the conscious experience of touching something. What you feel is your brain's interpretation of forces, not the forces themselves. This means that touch is doubly illusory. First, you're not actually making contact with solid objects because there are no solid objects. Second, your sensation of touch is a mental construction created by your brain's processing of electromagnetic information. The texture you feel when you run your fingers across a surface is your brain's interpretation of variations in electromagnetic force as your hand moves across regions with different atomic densities and arrangements. The smoothness or roughness you experience exists in your nervous system, not in the object itself. Temperature is another fascinating aspect of this illusion. When you touch something hot or cold, you're not directly experiencing the thermal energy of the object. You're experiencing your nervous system's response to changes in molecular motion that affect the electromagnetic interactions between your hand and the object. Heat is molecular motion. Faster moving molecules create stronger electromagnetic interactions, which your nervous system interprets as warmth. Slower moving molecules create weaker interactions, which you experience as coolness. But you're never in direct contact with the moving molecules themselves. Even pain from touching something sharp or rough is your nervous system's interpretation of electromagnetic forces that are stronger or more irregular than normal. The sharpness of a knife blade is really just atoms arranged in a way that concentrates electromagnetic forces into a smaller area, creating stronger repulsion that your nervous system interprets as pain. This has profound implications for how we understand the relationship between mind and matter, between subjective experience and objective reality. If touch is a mental construction based on electromagnetic forces rather than direct contact with solid objects, then the boundary between what's real and what's experienced becomes much more blurred. Your direct experience of the physical world is actually your nervous system's interpretation of force fields and energy patterns. The solid, substantial world you think you live in is a sophisticated simulation created by your brain based on electromagnetic information. This doesn't mean the world is an illusion in the sense of being fake or unimportant. The electromagnetic forces are real. The atomic structures they maintain are real. The patterns and relationships between atoms are real. But the way you experience these realities through touch is fundamentally different from what's actually happening at the physical level. You're not touching solid matter. You're experiencing electromagnetic field interactions interpreted by your nervous system as tactile sensations. The solidity you feel is a useful mental model that helps you navigate a world of force fields and energy patterns, but it's not literally accurate. This has implications that extend far beyond just understanding touch. If the most direct and immediate way you interact with the physical world is actually mediated by forces and interpreted by your nervous system, what does this say about all your other senses? Vision is your brain's interpretation of electromagnetic radiation. Sound is your brain's interpretation of pressure waves. Smell and taste are your brain's interpretation of molecular interactions. None of your senses give you direct access to the physical world. They all involve complex processes of detection, interpretation, and mental construction. You don't experience reality directly. You experience your nervous system's sophisticated modeling of reality based on various forms of energy and force interactions. Your entire sense of living in a physical world is a neurological construction built from electromagnetic and other physical information. This raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. If consciousness never directly contacts the physical world, but only experiences nervous system interpretations of physical forces, then consciousness might be far more separate from matter than we normally assume. Your mind might be interacting with patterns of information rather than directly with physical substances. This could explain why consciousness seems so different from material processes, why subjective experience seems to have qualities that can't be reduced to purely physical descriptions. If touch, the most immediate and convincing evidence for the reality of the physical world, is actually an electromagnetic information processing system interpreted by consciousness, then consciousness might be the primary reality with which you have direct contact, while the physical world is something you only know through information and interpretation. This connects to discoveries in quantum mechanics suggest consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining physical reality. If you never directly touch the physical world, but only experience your consciousness's interpretation of electromagnetic information, then consciousness might not be produced by matter, but might be the medium through which matter is experienced and possibly even created. But even if we stay within conventional physics, the reality of touch challenges our basic assumptions about the relationship between mind and world. The immediate, direct, undeniable experience of touching something solid is revealed to be a sophisticated informational process involving invisible forces interpreted by your nervous system. This suggests that many other things you take to be obvious and undeniable might also be more complex and indirect than they appear. If touch, the most basic and immediate form of physical interaction, is actually an illusion, then perhaps many other aspects of your experience of reality are also more constructed and less direct than you assume. The implications for physics and neuroscience are also significant. Understanding touch as electromagnetic force interaction rather than solid contact opens up new ways of thinking about materials science, robotics, and human-computer interfaces. If touch is really electromagnetic information processing, then it might be possible to create artificial touch sensations by directly stimulating the electromagnetic fields that your nervous system interprets as tactile experience. Virtual reality could become far more sophisticated by working directly with the electromagnetic basis of touch rather than just trying to create mechanical pressure sensations. Medical treatments for touch-related disorders could focus on the electromagnetic and neurological aspects of touch processing rather than just the mechanical aspects. Understanding touch as information interpretation could lead to new therapies for chronic pain, touch sensitivity disorders, and other conditions that affect tactile experience. But perhaps the most important implication is personal and philosophical. Recognizing that you never actually touch anything changes your relationship to the physical world in profound ways. You're not a solid object moving through solid space, making contact with solid things. You're a pattern of electromagnetic forces moving through a world of other electromagnetic force patterns, experiencing informational interactions that your consciousness interprets as a tactile, substantial reality. This doesn't make your experience less real or meaningful, but it does reveal that reality is far more subtle, complex, and mind-dependent than it appears. The solid world of everyday experience is a magnificent creation of electromagnetic forces and consciousness, not a simple collection of solid objects. You are not touching this screen as you read these words. You are experiencing electromagnetic field interactions interpreted by your consciousness as the sensation of touch. The reality is far stranger and more wonderful than the illusion, but the illusion is so convincing that most people never suspect the truth. Every handshake, every hug, every contact with the ground beneath your feet is an electromagnetic dance of forces that never quite touch, interpreted by a consciousness that creates the experience of contact from information about invisible field interactions. You live in a world where touching is impossible, but the illusion of touch is so perfect that it becomes the foundation for all your assumptions about what's real and what isn't. And recognizing this impossibility is the beginning of understanding what touch actually is and what you actually are in relationship to the electromagnetic universe that surrounds and suspends you. Nothing you touch is real, but something far more interesting than solidity is happening every time you reach out your hand. You're participating in an electromagnetic symphony of forces and fields, experiencing it through consciousness in a way that creates the beautiful illusion of a touchable world. And that illusion, built from invisible forces and consciousness, might be more real than any solid matter could ever be. But this revelation about touch raises even more disturbing questions about the nature of reality itself. If the most basic physical interaction is actually an electromagnetic illusion, what else about physical reality might be fundamentally different from what it appears to be? Consider the implications for human relationships. Every physical expression of love, comfort, or connection, every kiss, every embrace, every gentle touch is actually an electromagnetic force interaction between two collections of mostly empty space. You've never physically touched another human being in your entire life. Yet these electromagnetic interactions, interpreted by consciousness, create some of the most meaningful and important experiences of human existence. Physical intimacy and emotional connection are built on a foundation of forces that never actually make contact between solid objects. This suggests that the meaning and significance of human contact isn't diminished by understanding its electromagnetic nature. It's revealed to be even more remarkable. The fact that consciousness can create such powerful experiences of connection and intimacy through mere force field interactions points to the extraordinary nature of awareness itself. Your ability to feel love, comfort, and emotional connection through electromagnetic repulsion interpreted by your nervous system suggests that consciousness has capabilities that extend far beyond simple information processing. Consciousness takes abstract force interactions and transforms them into meaning, emotion, and relationship. This has implications for understanding personal identity and the boundaries of the self. If you never actually touch anything external to your body, and if your body itself is mostly empty space held together by electromagnetic forces, where exactly do you begin and end? The boundary between your body and the external world isn't a solid barrier where different materials meet. It's a region where the electromagnetic forces organizing one pattern of mostly empty atoms interact with electromagnetic forces organizing other patterns of mostly empty atoms. From this perspective, the distinction between self and world becomes much more fluid and arbitrary. You're not a solid object separate from other solid objects. You're a particular pattern of electromagnetic organization interacting with other patterns of electromagnetic organization in a continuous field of forces and energies. This connects to discoveries in quantum field theory that suggest individual particles don't have independent existence, but are excitations in underlying quantum fields that extend throughout space. Your sense of being a separate solid entity might be a macroscopic illusion created by the way consciousness organizes and interprets quantum field interactions. If this is correct, then understanding touch as electromagnetic force interaction rather than solid contact points toward a much more fundamental revision of how we think about existence itself. Individual objects, including individual bodies and minds, might be temporary patterns in more fundamental fields rather than separate entities making contact with each other. But even within conventional physics, the electromagnetic nature of touch reveals how little of what we consider physical interaction actually involves physical contact. Most of the forces that shape your daily life operate across empty space without any touching involved. Gravity, which keeps you connected to Earth and determines your weight and balance, operates across space without any contact between you and the planet. Magnetic forces can move objects without touching them. Electric fields can attract or repel charges across distances. Light and other electromagnetic radiation carry energy and information across vast reaches of empty space. The universe is filled with action at a distance, forces and influences that operate without any need for direct contact between solid objects. Touch, as an electromagnetic force interaction, is actually part of this larger pattern of non-contact influences rather than an exception to it. This raises questions about why evolution created the illusion of solid contact when the underlying reality is force interaction at a distance. Why did natural selection favor nervous systems that interpret electromagnetic repulsion as solid touching rather than developing more accurate representations of what's actually happening? The answer might be that the illusion of solid contact is far more useful for survival than an accurate understanding of electromagnetic forces would be. A nervous system that could accurately perceive the mostly empty nature of atoms and the force field interactions of touch would probably be overwhelmed by complexity and unable to make quick survival decisions. The simplification of electromagnetic force interactions into the experience of solid contact allows for rapid, intuitive responses to the environment that enhance survival. You can navigate the world effectively because your brain creates the useful illusion of solid contact from electromagnetic reality. Nothing you touch is real, but the illusion is so perfect that it becomes the foundation of all physical experience.